Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Karating. As you can see, it's relatively early in this side of town, and my folks are already up and running. These guys work really hard. In fact, they started working around 7 in the morning, and they don't stop till probably 8 in the night. And they are fixing the skirting, which initially was done using tiles, but we removed the tiles and are replacing those. In the meantime, my supervisors, as you can tell, are having their breakfast, and today they decided to do their quote-unquote typical American breakfast. Some really strange cereal, but they kind of like it, so we are rolling with it. But again, if you're encountering us for the first time, I hope you're going to watch this video till the end. And if at all this content interests you enough, I hope you subscribe. Now, today I'm going to talk about the issue of finishes. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I've gone through many buildings. Most of them are done by folks in diaspora. And unfortunately, a lot of them are so well done on the outside, but the interiors are not usually well done. Now, on our part, we've made a lot of mistakes. And in this video, I'm going to focus on the mistakes we've made, especially on the interiors. So while doing that, I'm going to show you some of the skirting repairs that we're doing, quote-unquote repairs, because the work we're doing right now is only focused on the lower floor. The upper floor will relatively remain the same. But over the years, we've made a lot of mistakes that I hope you don't have to by learning from our experiences. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that initially we used tiles, black tiles, to do the skirting on the floor. We've taken that out, and now we're using this synthetic material that we buy from Nairobi. They are far cheaper in Nairobi, and then we get them shipped just through the local couriers. And this particular material is waterproof. I think it looks better than tiles, and the joints are almost invisible. Now you'll notice in sections that have tiles, you'll notice breaks where the tiles are joined. But for this particular one, when it's all done, you will not see any breaks along it. So I think it looks better. You'll see the final one in the next video. So the upstairs will still remain tiles. For now, we're just using these particular materials for the lower level. And then for the upper one, we'll keep it with the tiles. You'll see how different it is, but I think it looks better as is. And so let's start by talking about some of the things that may resonate with you. For one, if you're like me, chances are you're probably passionate about building. You enjoy watching really good or well-done buildings, but you may have very little experience, in part because we don't do this for a living. And those of us who find ourselves in construction, it's because we are interested and we want to do something for ourselves, but we don't do this for a living. Chances are you and I are learning mostly from YouTube or from visiting folks who are doing the same thing. But unfortunately, what we see on YouTube doesn't always translate to what's going to happen at your site. I'm a living example of that, where I see some really beautiful stuff. I try to do the same thing on the ground, but it almost never works. And in the process, as I've mentioned earlier, we made lots of mistakes that I'm going to highlight in today's video. So I'm going to break these mistakes in about 5 different categories, starting with electricals. So with electricals, the first mistake we made was not thinking carefully about the number of sockets or the number of outlets in a particular room. And at the drawing stages, I realized that in our living room area, you could find like a much bigger space with only one outlet. Now that can be really problematic once you're done building, because either you're going to have to demolish and recreate new lines, or you're going to have to put extensions everywhere. The second problem, we didn't think about the types of outlets that we're using. Currently, there are many different types of outlets, including those with USB ports. That we didn't think about in advance. And then, of course, we never thought about extra provisions for lighting along the wall. In my case, actually, my electrician mentioned it, but I didn't care for lights on the walls. But after Construction, now I want them, but I didn't put the provisions. In some cases, we actually didn't think carefully about the locations of the switches. And so we almost realized at the end that there are some switches that are going to be behind the door. So that you open a door, it's all dark, and then you look for a switch behind the door. That is one thing that sometimes people forget about. And then, of course, we didn't separate the systems. Our home has 2 levels. We have the ground floor, and then you have the first floor. We didn't separate the system such that if we need to switch off the system on one level, we could do that successfully. So I had to bring another electrician to separate them such that if we have an issue on the upper floor, we simply switch off the upper floor while people can still operate on the lower floor. And then, of course, the security lights were automated. And that's usually fine. The only problem with that is that on days where I have less power because I use solar, then it was difficult for me to switch off the security lights. So connecting the security lights with the gate lights was a problem. And then, of course, the location for the token gadget, I don't know what they call it. Initially, we had it so high that whoever was going to need to load tokens would have to climb literally multiple chairs to go up there. So we had to change that. And then, of course, some exterior bulbs are also so high that if we need to replace bulbs, you almost need a crane to get up there. In some cases, I think one main problem was that we also forgot to separate the caretaker house from the main house in terms of the electrical systems. In many cases, people prefer to not include the solar line with the caretaker house, so that the caretaker can only use the solar for lighting. The problem that created for me is that they were using heating systems with the solar power, and that was a massive problem. And then, of course, there were massive mistakes with the plaster. The main issue with my plaster is that I was using a lot of unskilled folks who really gave me massive problems. And here's one example of a problem with plaster. In the door section, you would find on the left side of the door, the thickness would be like about 3 inches. And then on the right side, the thickness is 5 inches. And so when it comes to fitting or painting works and doors and woodworks, it's a massive problem. So plaster work, this is one place where you do not want to mess up. Then issues with tiling. The first thing is that I did not buy the tiles in person. So one of the main problems you'll notice with tiles is that what you get on the picture isn't always exactly the same thing as what you find on the ground. And so I wish I actually bought them in person. The second problem, I didn't buy extra tiles. And so at some point we ran out of tiles, and when I went back to the shop, they were no longer producing the same tiles. And so I have a scenario where our closet area has very different tiles versus the rest of the floor because I didn't buy extra tiles. And then, of course, I used different masons to fix tiles because at some point we disagree and then I get a different footy. The problem is, as you walk on the floor, you'll actually notice the difference between one guy to the next guy. And it's really not fun. And then there are specific types of tiles that I believe come from India that really break very easily. And so the problem with those types of tiles is that when you're transporting them from Nairobi to Kisumu, the loss ratio is not in your favor because you lose a lot of tiles due to breakage. And then the last thing with tiles too had to do with the cleanup. Anywhere folks use cement, you want to make sure that they clean up properly because the tiles somehow adhere to dirt very easily, and so cleanup becomes such a problem later on if they don't clean up while they are working. I've already talked about paint job, where again our main problem was that I used local guys for painting, which was a massive problem because there was very little quality control. And then with our bathrooms too, we had the first issue that we had with bathrooms was that I eliminated certain bathrooms, in part because I thought I was saving money. But then it turned out that whatever I saved by removing one bathroom really was not worth it because it doesn't cost a whole lot in the grand scheme of things to keep a bathroom or two here. So I wish I didn't have to eliminate some of those bathrooms because it actually changed the design of some bedrooms. And then, of course, the other main problem that I encountered had to do with the layout of each floor, because of each bathroom. Because typically, most of our bathrooms have a vanity area, they have the shower, and then they have the toilet. And so if you don't think carefully as to what goes where, then you end up with this weird scenario where you open the door and then you run into the wet area first before you get to the toilet and all that stuff. And so thinking carefully as to where you place the toilet, where the bathroom goes, where the vanity goes and the shower area goes is critical before you go too far with building. And then, of course, the outside vanity. Most Kenyans, or many Kenyans, like having this area where people can wash hands outside of the bathroom. I personally don't care for it, but if you do, there are really good ways to place it in a way that is sort of private. That is something that I didn't think about in advance. And then, of course, with the bathroom fittings, there are specific silver fittings that are used to hold the glass partitions. And the silver ones, you may never know until late. Some of them are really cheap and then they start rusting. So I recommend stay away from those silver ones. Or if you must use the silver ones, make sure they are not the ones that rust after a while. And then, of course, some glass partitions were not watertight. And what that means is that over time, as you shower, water starts leaking from the shower area into the other sections of the bathroom. So that's something I didn't pay attention to while they were fixing it. And then when it comes to tiling, I chose to do tiling all the way up to about half of the wall. Big mistake. Because in my mind, I thought I was saving, but it didn't work out well. So floor to ceiling tiling actually works really well with bathrooms. And then, of course, when you're thinking about gypsum designs, there are some really good designs that work for bathrooms that we'll share later on out there. And then lastly, with drainage, when you're talking about the flow of water in the shower area, the tiling guys apparently don't seem to test that. So I've had almost 3 different areas in my house, both inside and out, where water pools and doesn't flow correctly into the drain. So what you want to do is that whenever they're doing the tiling, especially in places where you expect there to be water, make sure they check the flow so that it's tilted in such a way that when people are taking a shower, it actually goes towards the drainage area. And then the last area of interior mistakes that I'm going to highlight in this video has to do with the accessibility. Many of us who live in diaspora really care about the issue of making a home accessible to people with disabilities or those who use wheelchairs. The one mistake we made was the height of the vanities. Our vanities are really high, and that is a problem for kids and can also be problematic for people who use wheelchair. Now, in a later video, I'm going to do an in-depth discussion about accessibility. Overall, I hope this video was informative enough. If it was, I hope you subscribe, and I will see you in the next. Thank you.